Meet the Transfers Tennessee Volunteers edition. This is the 10th ranked transfer class in the country, according to us. We ranked the top 20. Tennessee falls in right at 10. I am looking for where I had Tennessee. I had them 8th overall. Brian, does 10th feel about right to you? Where did you have them?
10th feels about right. I think I had them in that range too. I wouldn't be surprised if I had them, I want to say like 12th or 13th. I need to I need to
You
look
had
back
them
at our
17th.
rankings.
Found it.
17th.
17th. So you are low on them,
I'm
Brian. You don't
down
get to
on
claim
I'm
it.
down on Tennessee. I think there are good pieces here, and I would not be surprised if I underrated them by a lot. But I do think there's a lot we are expecting to happen, but it's a lot of projection. And so I want to see some of that projection actually come to fruition before I'm ready to start cashing that in.
You have me intrigued, and normally I'm the negative one on these shows, so I'm gonna enjoy the role reversal here of me being the positive one. It's a four-man transfer class, headlined by one of the biggest names that hit the portal this year, and then high major starter and a couple guys who were extremely good at the mid-major level. We'll go player by player and give our expectations for each. But first, simple question: did Rick Barnes do what he set out to do when building this transfer class?
I think he did. He didn't have a ton to do. I know we've done some where guys have had to like revamp their entire roster, so they're spraying the board. But Rick Barnes didn't have to necessarily do that. He went out, he got Chaz Lanier and Darlinson Dubar, improved the wings, essentially two guard and the three. You could argue who was what, but improved those, added some offensive pop there. You lost Jonas Adu, but you brought in Felix Akara from Ohio State. That's not essentially a one-for-one replacement, but that fills that role. So I think so. You did what you set out to do. We're going to debate about whether it was the job you needed to do to meet your expectations or not. But I think so.
I think it's a yes too. I have some tweaks on what I might have done differently at certain positions, but the ultimate thing is you found this successful formula of surrounding a superstar scorer with a bunch of role player, intangible, defensive minded guys. You returned a lot of those defensive minded guys, and then I think the ones you added can do their best to attempt to replicate what you got from Connect. Now, I don't think anyone individually in this class is Dalton Connect 2.0. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe one of them is. But to me, you don't even necessarily want Dalton Connect 2. Obviously, if you had one, you'd love it. It's not going to be successful to try and have one of these guys be Dalton Connect. It would be successful to have a couple of them add together and give you the scoring punch that you got from one superstar last year. And I think they did that. I think they have two guys who can extremely, extremely fill it up. I'm looking forward to watching some of these guys in a Tennessee uniform. And then what could they have done better? Is there one thing that would have made this a better offseason for them transfer wise?
I think the one thing for me is you talked about the formula and adding a proven scorer. Like they cashed in a lottery ticket with Connect last year, going from Northern Colorado. I don't think you can necessarily rely on up transfers carrying over the same level of scoring production in the same way. And I understand Chaz Lanier was one of the most sought after recruits of the country and or transfers in the country and should have been. Dubar had a great production at Hofstra. You'd rather have him than not. But like you're counting on those guys doing what Connect did, which was one maintaining a production. Connect exceeded his production in Northern Colorado at Tennessee, but you're counting on the transition from lower levels from North Florida, in Lanier's case, to Tennessee and the SEC, that not impacting your production and your efficiency. And I understand it worked with Connect, but Connect was one of a kind, and that is more the exception than the rule.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he was an extremely original player archetype from his story to his actual abilities to his production. I completely agree with everything you're saying. The one big tweak that I would have, more on this in just a moment, I am not sure I would have handled the front court the way they did. I don't think the personnel that they got are necessarily an upgrade from the personnel that are departing.
Yeah.
Jonas Adu and Toby Awaka are two guys who are still playing college basketball next season. Those guys didn't run out of eligibility. This felt very much like, hey, we're not happy with these guys, and or these guys are not happy here. In my mind, if you could have kept the same front court, this could be a better team on paper than the two guys they added. But more on that in just a moment, because we're now going to go player by player. Starting with the I guess the bottom of the totem pole here is the guy who scored the least last season. We'll work our way up with points per game. It was Felix Akara, 6'11" center. He played 23 minutes a game at Ohio State last year. He averaged 6 and 6. This was 2 seasons at Ohio State. Now, his freshman season, I saw him in person, and it was very much like a keep an eye on him, breakout season in the future once he gets a starting role. Year 2, they tried to give him that starting role, and he didn't do much with it, in my opinion. Now, he is a rim protector type for sure. He can block shots. He's a springy athlete. He passes the eye test. But to me, he always left a lot to be desired at Ohio State with his physicality or lack thereof. And when you think Tennessee, you think extreme bruising toughness centers. That is not Felix Akara at all to me, no matter how many shots he blocks. So I think he's the starting center by default, but
Yes.
I think he may underwhelm as the starting center.
It is easy to see the rim protection and the block rate and those numbers and pencil this in as an easy, good fit for both Akpara and Tennessee. And I think there's a chance that it can be. But to your point, you are not going to play, particularly center, for Rick Barnes' team if you can't handle physicality and toughness and you are not one of the toughest mother bleepers on the court. And that's been Akpara's issue, is that at times he's not necessarily soft, but doesn't bring the elite level of physicality that I think was needed from a big man in Big Ten. And it's definitely going to be needed from a big man in the SEC and in Rick Barnes's system. For him to have the ultimate impact, I think he needs to bring that and then take the strides forward on the offensive end that we would have liked to have seen last season. Now, given the way last season went for Ohio State, you could say, you have the excuses of Holtman's mid-season firing, and then they were piecing things together at the end of the year, caught fire, and he was kind of in and out of what that was. That's fine. I think you can make that excuse. But the fact you didn't see the positive strides that you were hoping to see, given what he showed during his freshman season, has me a little bit concerned. I think that kind of keeps him into a defensive first role as opposed to somebody who can be more well-rounded and somebody who plays a significant impact for you on both ends of the court. But I do think there are questions of whether his defensive ability and production is going to fall off if he can't be as physical as he needs to be.
Yeah, in my mind, we kind of played big man musical chairs with a couple programs and coaches here. Like,
right,
trying to go through this. Ohio State thinks they upgraded Felix Akpara by bringing in Aaron Bradshaw. John Calipari, who coached Aaron Bradshaw, thinks he upgraded from potentially bringing Aaron Bradshaw with him to Arkansas to instead taking Jonas Adu. And Tennessee thinks Jonas Adu was worse than Felix Akpara, and they upgraded from Adu to Akpara. All that says to me is nobody's happy with those guys. Me, Adu is the one who is the best player, in my opinion, like by a long shot. I think what Adu did last year at Tennessee is miles ahead of whatever Felix Akpara and Aaron Bradshaw's potential is supposed to be. I mean, those guys had chances and they didn't put it together into productive seasons. Ohio State was awful last year. And in my opinion, Akpara was a big part of it. He was constantly on the floor and really did not contribute. So we'll see. I might be wrong. The shot blocking is tantalizing. He doesn't have an offensive game and he's not the most physical guy. Hopefully Rick Barnes can get something out of him. The next guy up the list is Egor Milicevic from Charlotte. 6'10" big. I think for some guys or some teams, he would play center. At Tennessee, he may start next to Akpara, and if it goes poorly, maybe one of those guys wins the job. 12.8 points, 8.5 rebounds last year. Not a huge rim protector, but he can step out and shoot it a little bit. 37% from 3. What is his role, and what do you expect from Milicic?
It would not surprise if he's a 6-man who plays starter minutes, because he does not bring the physicality or the defense that you would expect from Rick Barnes in Tennessee, and doesn't necessarily fit Tennessee's identity in that regard. So it wouldn't surprise me if they use him as a change of pace guy off the bench and play him starter minutes. And I think that him being the change of pace guy is interesting because I don't remember the last time Tennessee or Rick Barnes had a guy like this, like a true stretch big who was more comfortable on the perimeter than truly banging down low in the post. I think it's
Yeah.
going to be an interesting dynamic for Tennessee and how they work that. But I think that keeps him from being like a full on starter, knowing what Tennessee's identity is.
Yeah. Yeah, this roster is kind of lacking like the hybrid swingman 3-4 types. Like you got a bunch of guards,
Mm-hmm.
some really I guess high prolific profile shooting guards, and then you got some true centers, and then you got nothing in between really. Like I guess Cameron Carr is like a 6'5" guard, Cade Phillips is 6'9". You got JP Estrella off the bench, but like to me, Egor is like the one guy who kind of slides in between like a true 3 and a true 5. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe that means he plays a lot. Maybe that means he starts at the 4. Maybe that means he's a bench guy because somebody else emerges. If it is a bench guy, Tennessee's going to be smaller to me than they've ever been under Rick Barnes in recent years. Like I don't really ever recall them going small at the 4. And if they were to go small at the 4 with this team, to me it would be like who Dubar at the 4 with 3 guards.
Yeah, like what they had done last year and at times last couple of years is slide Josiah Jordan James down and play him at the 4. And so in my mind, if you're keeping that idea, right, that lineup style, you're going to slide somebody who's 6'5", 6'6", and physical down to the 4 to try and provide some spacing. Now, Milicic can certainly slide in there, but then if you have him and Akpara as your front court, you are sacrificing interior toughness
Yeah.
and interior physicality by doing so. And I don't know if Rick Barnes is going to do that. That might mean Milicic starts instead of Akpara. I do not know, but I think he gives the Tennessee coaching staff some more wrinkles and I think some more options in the lineups they want to play than perhaps we've seen the last couple of years.
Yeah, I guess I'll agree that he's a role player then, a sixth man type on paper, because I think you've talked me into maybe they just start the small ball lineup instead. But it will not surprise me at all. I mean, I think from what I've seen, I think he's a better player than Felix Akpara. So
Might
even
be.
if Akpara starts the season, I think there's a chance he could end up taking it. And it is worth noting, like obviously not a stellar defensive player by any means, but he did begin his career at Virginia, and Tony Bennett doesn't typically bring a lot of guys in that aren't at least worth something on the defensive end. It didn't work out at Virginia, but maybe a guy who could be unlocked a little bit with a coach who has a history of coaching great defenses in Rick
Maybe.
Barnes. We'll see.
Maybe.
To the two big names here, working up the list, Darlin Stone Dubar. I think in a lot of transfer classes this year, Darlin Stone Dubar would be the headliner for a lot of different teams. For Tennessee,
Yep.
he is not. 17.8 points last season. Fifth year guy from Hofstra. He was absurdly efficient, 54% from the floor, 40% from 3. Really, I felt like weekly I was doing some graphics for the Philo 68 mid-major show, and Dubar was like every single week we had to make something on how good this guy was. And it felt like it was very under the radar. Like while Chaz Lanier got a lot of hype along the way, I don't know that Dubar ever did. But to
Mm-hmm.
me, he's got a huge opportunity, maybe every bit as much of an opportunity as Lanier does to become the leading go-to guy offensively on this team.
I think he's for sure a starter, obviously. His offense and versatility, you bring him in to start. It will not surprise me if he is the star instead of Lanier. Like I think there is a legitimate case to be made, and you started making it, that he becomes the guy that people assume Lanier is going to be. He was that efficient, that productive at Hofstra, playing on a pretty good team in a system that won't necessarily translate, but the way Tennessee is probably going to run 3 guards, he's going to see some mismatches at the 3. And maybe they slide him to the 4. But he'll see some mismatches. And again, I feel more comfortable with his efficiency transferring over than I do Lanier's. Like I think he's probably going to average 14, 15, more than likely, perhaps more, perhaps a little bit less. But I think he's somebody that Tennessee is going to be able to rely on to bring them offense every single night.
Yeah, I have landed on that. I think he is the star of this team. I think Darlin Stone Dubar is going to lead this team in scoring. That's my belief. Now, we'll talk about Lanier in just a second. But when comparing them to me, Dubar has less competition on this team for his role. To me, he's the
Mhm.
only guy shaped like a true wing. I think he can play the four. If they go to the small ball stuff, it will not surprise me if Dubar becomes the four. If he's the three, I think he's a superstar three. He's certainly got SEC size at the three. He has such a track record. It wasn't just 1 year, right? This wasn't like a blow up crazy 1 year at Hofstra. Now the scoring was down, but part of that was he didn't play a ton. Like his first 2 years at Hofstra, he was under 30 minutes a game. He averaged 12 points in 29 minutes as a sophomore, 10 points in 25 minutes as a junior. Every single year he was at Hofstra, he was over 50% from the floor as a volume scorer type. Like they don't make
Yeah.
guys that do that. The SEC is different. There's going to be way bigger challenges defensively for him, but I just buy that the efficiency is real. There's a track record there. I don't think when he's out there, he's thinking anything but score, really. And I think that's okay because Connect was
Yeah.
wired the same way. And positionally, this makes a lot of sense. And this is one of my favorite fits, not just for the team. It's my favorite fit for a player out of all the transfers in this class. Dubar chose the right spot based on, like, I kept saying, how has nobody
Yeah.
scooped up the Dalton Connect role yet? To me, Dubar got it, and he got it before Lanier got it. And I think he's going to be great. And then the last name here is Chaz Lanier. Again, I have Dubar ahead of him in the pecking order. I have Lanier just as a good starter, and I think that's perfectly fine. But there are a lot of people who think Lanier is going to be a superstar. He was the most efficient volume scorer in all of college basketball last season. 51% from the floor, 44% from three, 20 points a game, 6'4" guard. What do you think Lanier is going to look like at Tennessee?
Yeah, there's a lot to like. There's a lot to like. I think worst case scenario for him is that he is a starter. Best case scenario is he's the star. Um, they are counting on him to be the star. I understand that we just talked up Dubar a lot, and we both think that he may end up being the better option of the two. But Lanier was brought in to be that guy. Like he held out longer. It was Tennessee and Kentucky as a final two, I believe, in his transfer recruitment. Opted for the Vols. The thinking is that he is going to be the lead scorer, the go-to guy. That's what they're counting on him to be. And again, as you mentioned, ruthlessly efficient last year, incredibly high volume, and produced the way you would want him to, like as a prospect, not from an NBA draft standpoint, but as a you're Tennessee and you get the 6'4" guard, average 20 points a game, and average shot over 50% and 44% from the field goal and three last year. That's ideal to come in and take that Dalton Connect role. I have questions if he can be that efficient playing Tennessee competition as opposed to North Florida competition. But I understand the appeal there, and they're counting on him, I think, to be the star.
I do think that's what they brought him here to do. I don't disagree with that. Improvement is an interesting thing in life, Brian. It's an interesting thing in all forms, all walks of life, but in college basketball especially, some guys improve more rapidly than others. Some guys improve just it looks different. Like a guy can gradually take incremental steps from year 1 to year 4, and you see them every step of the way. And then other guys wake up one day and are a completely different player, and you don't know how it happened. Role, fit, with the transfer portal jumping around, and opportunity is a huge part of that. My issue with Lanier is this. It's not anything he did last season. He was incredible last season. There's no denying that. I don't know who the real Lanier is, though, because he was more than forgettable his first 3 seasons at North Florida. It's not just like he was a guy. He was barely playable, in my opinion, his first 3 years. And maybe that's a little harsh, but we have, like, you add it up. I have Basketball Reference open right now. In his first 3 seasons at North Florida, he played 1,357 minutes. In that span, he was a 34% shooter from three. So 43% from the floor guy. I mean, he scored 300 points in 1,300 minutes. It's not that he had lack of opportunity. He wasn't. He wasn't that guy. Maybe it's role, but that's kind of a we know who this guy is. He's a role player. And then all of a sudden he woke up his 4th year at North Florida, and he was the most efficient volume scorer in the sport. And now the minutes he played his senior year were less minutes than the first 3 years combined. And I'm not saying we need to just throw it aside and pretend it didn't happen, but we see guys have I guess, asterisk shooting years all the time, right? Like catch
Right.
lightning in a bottle. We have seen that so many times. And I mean, he was 60% from 2-point range, 44% from three on 9 attempts per 40 minutes last year. He was chucking, and they all went in. But that didn't happen. There was no sign of that. It's like the most random player in the country to snap
Yeah.
their fingers and have that happen to. And I just look at when you combine him with the rest of Tennessee's roster, he might be just instantly way better than these guys. And some of the reports from practice are that he has been. So it sounds like they're expecting that. But Zakai Ziegler's played so many minutes. He's a really good guard. And yes, he's a pass first guard, but like, do I think Chaz Lanier's gonna waltz right in and be way better than Zakai Ziegler? I don't know. Like Jordan Gainey had huge scoring games last year. He needs
Right.
opportunity too. So I think there's more competition, and I don't think there's any world where he just shoots 60% from 2-point range again. And
No.
we'll find out, right? Like if he can do it, he can do it, and that's the plan. If he can't do it, the nice thing is you have Dubar as a backup plan, but count
Yep.
me on the skeptical side that it actually happens.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. And those first 3 seasons, I think, scare you if you want to look at where this falls apart. And that's where I think having Lanier and Dubar means a lot because it gives yourself a little bit of a buffer in case one of them doesn't produce the way you hope they do.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's do some superlatives to end this. At the end of the season, who is the best player from this 4-man transfer class?
I do think it's going to be Lanier.
Sticking with Lanier. Okay, I'm on
Yeah.
Dubar. We might need a little side bet on this, Brian. I'd be game for that. Who will improve the most from the first game of the season to the last game of the season from this class?
I think Akpara will because I think that toughness and physicality is going to get instilled in him.
Given that I am out on Lanier, I'm going to go Lanier because
Okay.
I think there's going to be an adjustment period. And by the end of the season, I do think Lanier will be a huge part of this team. I just don't think it's going to be as plug and play as be our superstar.
Yeah.
But I expect gradual improvement. Final question. I want a hot take. What's your Tennessee transfer hot take?
They're kind of like a part A and part B. They go hand in hand. I think by the end of the season, either Lanier or Dubar are starting, not both of them. One of them is starting. And
Ooh.
Zakai Ziegler is the team's best guard. And that has more to do with what I think Ziegler is than either of those two.
Wow. Okay. I am not opposed to that whatsoever. I got to do a front court oriented one, I think. I'm just debating how hot I really want to be here. I'll just say Felix Akara doesn't start by February. That's probably the hottest I can go. I was going to say neither Milicic or Akpara start. But
That
then I'm
puts
looking
Tennessee
like,
in bad shape.
yeah, like is JP Estrella starting really? Like, honestly, I kind of buy that. I kind of
I'm
buy.
sure there will be games where Rick Barnes wants to send a message.
Yeah. I will say this. If Rick Barnes can get Felix Akpara to be like a physical beast, then I gotta completely reassess what I think of Rick Barnes, because that would be something that Chris Holtman couldn't do at Ohio State. Jake Diebler, who's the new Ohio State coach and was on staff, couldn't do it at Ohio State. So it's possible. There's a lot of talent to work with, but no matter what we think, if we're skeptical of certain guys, this is a great class. It's a loaded class.
Yep.
And, Rick Barnes in Tennessee did a great job. If you like this video, we got 20 more of these. We did all 20 of our top 21 transfer classes. They're dropping 3 per day on the Sleepers Media channel this week and next week. Car, you know what I love about you?
That I'm handsome?
You're reliable. I can count on you. You know, honestly, you remind me of Aaron Henry a little bit. Remember when, like, you know, their back was against the wall, nothing was going right, and man just showed up every day. He didn't make excuses. There were no problems. There were just solutions.
Sounds like me.
That's you. And it also reminds me of Duncan Mechanical Solutions, because if you're looking for quality furnace repair, look no further than the heating and air experts that you can trust. Comfort and quality are their standard. They're an HVAC company that serves Northeast Indiana and Southern Michigan, whether it's heating and air conditioning, plumbing, kitchen and bath remodeling, or emergency services when you need them most. Duncan Mechanical Solutions has reliable service that you can count on. Cart, remember when your basement almost exploded?
I remember when my basement always exploded. I remember when my furnace itself was acting funny. I remember when my AC was acting funny. I wish I had Duncan in my back pocket. I wouldn't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been anywhere in northern Indiana or southern Michigan that hasn't been perfectly cool or perfectly warm, depending on when the day called for. And that's because of Duncan Mechanical Solutions. They are the presenting sponsor for the month of July. Shout out to Duncan Mechanical Solutions. Go to duncanmechanicalsolutions.com to learn more.